My husband and sister teamed up to tell me I was infertile, forcing me to pay for a surrogate. When the surrogate disappears with my money, I discover there was never a baby, just a plot to bankrupt me and run away together using my family's legacy. I still remember the night everything shifted. It wasn't a quiet, gradual realization. It was a jarring moment that left me standing in the middle of my own living room, staring at two people I thought I could trust. My husband leaned against the mantel, his arms crossed, his tone sharp but oddly rehearsed. My sister sat beside me on the couch, her hand resting lightly on mine, her voice dripping with sympathy that felt too polished to be real. Together they told me something that would change the course of my life. I could never have children. At first I laughed nervously, thinking it was some kind of cruel joke. But their faces didn't soften. My husband's jaw tightened, his eyes cold, while my sister's gaze flickered with what looked like pity. They spoke of doctors, of tests I had supposedly failed, of medical opinions I had never heard directly from a professional. I asked for proof, for reports, for names of specialists. My husband brushed me off, saying it was too painful to go through again. My sister squeezed my hand, whispering that I should accept the truth and think about alternatives. The word surrogate slipped into the conversation like a dagger. My husband presented it as a solution, a way to preserve our family's legacy. My sister chimed in, insisting it was the only chance I had to experience motherhood. Their voices overlapped, pressing me, cornering me, until I felt like a child being scolded rather than a woman making a choice. I tried to resist. I wanted time, space, a second opinion. But every attempt to slow things down was met with frustration. My husband accused me of being in denial. My sister sighed dramatically, saying she hated to see me suffer. They painted me as fragile, incapable of facing reality, and I began to doubt myself. The days that followed were filled with whispered conversations I wasn't meant to hear. My husband on the phone late at night, his tone clipped and urgent. My sister visiting more often than usual, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for something. I caught fragments, mentions of money, of arrangements, of making sure she agrees. Each time I confronted them, they dismissed me with practiced ease. Doctor visits became another layer of the deception. My husband insisted on handling the appointments, claiming he didn't want me burdened with the details. I sat in sterile waiting rooms, listening to vague explanations, never seeing the actual paperwork. My sister accompanied me once, her arm linked with mine, whispering reassurances that felt rehearsed. I left each visit more confused, more ashamed, more convinced that maybe they were right. The emotional toll was crushing. I began to carry a weight of shame, convinced that my body had betrayed me. I avoided friends, skipped family gatherings, and buried myself in silence. My husband grew colder, his affection replaced by impatience. My sister's sympathy became suffocating, her constant reminders of what I couldn't do, gnawing at my confidence. One evening I overheard them in the kitchen. My husband's voice was low but sharp. "She'll pay for it. She has no choice." My sister laughed softly, a sound that chilled me. I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding, realizing that their concern wasn't about me, it was about control. The decision to pay for the surrogate was framed as my only hope. My husband presented it like a business deal, laying out costs and timelines. My sister sat beside me, her hand on my shoulder, her voice dripping with false compassion. I signed the papers with trembling hands, my gut screaming that something was wrong. Even as I agreed, a part of me knew I was being manipulated. The unease in their voices, the hidden motives in their eyes, the way they pushed me into a corner, it all pointed to something darker. But I was too exhausted, too broken, too desperate to fight. That was the beginning of the deception. A carefully constructed lie woven by the two people I trusted most. A lie that would unravel my life, piece by piece, until I had nothing left but the truth, and the fire of revenge burning inside me. The silence in the house was deafening the morning I realized she was gone. I had woken early, restless from another night of uneasy sleep, and reached for my phone to check messages. Nothing. No updates, no reassurances, no cheerful reminders from the woman who was supposed to be carrying my child. I dialed her number, my hands trembling, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried again. And again. Each attempt ended the same way. An empty tone, a hollow promise that someone might answer if I just kept trying. By noon, panic had set in. I called my husband at work, my voice shaking as I told him something was wrong. He arrived home quickly, too quickly, his face twisted in anger that seemed oddly rehearsed. He slammed his fist against the table, shouting about betrayal, about being cheated. Yet his words felt hollow, as though he was performing outrage rather than truly feeling it. My sister sat quietly in the corner, her lips pressed together, her eyes avoiding mine. That silence spoke louder than his fury. I couldn't sit still. I drove across town to the address I had been given for the surrogate. The small apartment building looked abandoned, its paint peeling, its windows dark. I knocked on the door, called out her name, but no one answered. A neighbor peeked out from behind a curtain, shaking their head when I asked if they had seen her. "She moved out last week," they said flatly before closing the curtain again. The next few days blurred into a frantic search. I visited clinics where she had supposedly gone for checkups, only to be told they had no record of her. I questioned strangers, followed leads that dissolved into nothing, and chased shadows across the city. Each dead end chipped away at my hope, leaving me exhausted and hollow. The financial loss hit me hard. I had poured money into this arrangement. Money I believed was securing my future, my family, my chance at motherhood. But the emotional devastation was worse. I grieved for a child that had never existed, for dreams that had been dangled before me only to be snatched away. I cried alone at night, clutching the empty crib I had bought, whispering lullabies to a phantom. My husband's behavior grew stranger. His anger flared at odd moments, then cooled into eerie calm. He spoke of lawyers, of suing, of reclaiming what was lost, but his tone lacked conviction. My sister avoided me altogether, her visits dwindling, her excuses piling up. When she did appear, she offered no comfort, only vague words that dissolved into silence. Slowly I began piecing together inconsistencies. The surrogate's name never appeared on official documents. The clinic visits were always arranged by my husband, never confirmed by me. My sister's stories shifted, small details changing each time she spoke. I remembered overhearing laughter, whispers, fragments of conversations that had once seemed harmless but now carried sinister weight. One evening I found myself staring at a stack of receipts. They didn't add up. Payments made to places that didn't exist, transfers to accounts I couldn't trace. My heart pounded as I realized the truth. The surrogate was never real. She was a pawn, a phantom created to drain me of everything I had. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. It wasn't just the loss of money or the absence of a child. It was the realization that the two people I trusted most, my husband and my sister, had woven this deception together, smiling as they watched me fall. I sat in the dark that night, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. My grief shifted, hardened, transformed into something sharper. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a woman who had been played, and I was beginning to see the cracks in their facade. The surrogate had vanished, but the real disappearance was my faith in them. And once that was gone, all that remained was the fire of resolve burning quietly inside me. The night I uncovered the truth, the house felt colder than usual. I sat at the dining table, the receipts and fragments of paperwork spread before me like pieces of a puzzle. My hands trembled as I traced the ink, realizing every number, every signature, every detail had been carefully orchestrated to drain me of everything I had. The surrogate was never real. The money was gone. And worse, my husband and sister had planned it together. I couldn't breathe at first. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and I felt as though the walls were closing in. But then something shifted. The grief that had consumed me hardened into fury. My trust had been shattered, but in its place grew a determination I had never known before. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. My husband walked in, his tie loosened, his expression smug. He saw the papers on the table and smirked as if I were a child caught snooping. "You shouldn't dig into things you don't understand," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. My sister appeared moments later, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously between us. She tried to speak, but her words faltered. I stood, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You lied to me. Both of you. You stole from me and you thought I wouldn't notice." My husband laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the room. "You were too easy," he sneered. My sister's lips trembled, guilt flickering across her face, but she stayed silent. Suddenly, small incidents from the past began to align in my mind. The late-night phone calls, the hushed conversations, the sudden trips my sister claimed were work-related. The hidden documents I once dismissed as business papers. Even the coded phrases they used when they thought I wasn't listening. It all made sense now. They had been weaving this web for months, maybe longer, and I had been the prey. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, I let the silence stretch, forcing them to sit in the weight of their betrayal. My husband grew restless, pacing the room, his arrogance cracking into irritation. My sister finally whispered, "I didn't want it to go this far." Her voice was weak, her guilt spilling through, but it was too late. That night I began to plan. My grief transformed into resolve. I thought of every resource I still had, every ally I could call upon, every way I could turn their scheme against them. I remembered my father's lessons about legacy, about strength, about never letting anyone take what was rightfully mine. I started small. I gathered evidence. Receipts, bank statements, fragments of conversations I had recorded without realizing their importance. I spoke to people they had dealt with, piecing together the trail they thought was hidden. Each discovery fueled me, each lie uncovered sharpened my resolve. My revenge was not impulsive. It was calculated, deliberate, and precise. I confronted them again, this time with proof. My husband's arrogance faltered when I laid the documents before him. My sister broke down, her guilt spilling into tears, but I didn't waver. I told them their game was over, that I would expose them for what they were. The final act was mine alone. I took control of the finances they thought they had stolen. I secured the legacy they had tried to claim. And I made sure their betrayal was known, not through shouting or violence, but through quiet, undeniable truth. When it was done, I felt lighter, stronger, wiser. I had been broken, manipulated, deceived, but I had risen from it, free from their grasp. My revenge was not just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about reclaiming myself. And as I closed the door on them, leaving their schemes behind, I knew I had won. Not through cruelty but through strength. Not through despair but through resolve. I was free, and I would never be deceived again.